Hello, my name is Reverend Katrina Jenkins, and I serve as Dean of Religious Life at Rollins College, as well as a Board of Trustee member for the Winter Park Public Library. Today I'm going to read a book by Johnnetta Cole, Dr. Johnnetta Cole, entitled Conversations. My excerpt will come from her chapter entitled On Being Black in America. Perhaps more so than any other time, when Black History Month rolls around, African American women look back with pride and praise at the creativity of Phyllis Wheatley, the daring of Harriet Tubman, the oratory of Sojourner Truth, the bravery of Ida B. Wells. We reflect on countless others, artists and activists, educators and entrepreneurs who have made enormous contributions towards the empowerment of the African American community and the betterment of our nation. To the roll call of all the sheroes with the name recognition, we could easily add the names of thousands of lesser-known women. As well as we should, we celebrate these women as lights along the Freedom Trail, indicators of how far we have come. I sometimes fear, however, that we forget that we still have a long way to go. Today, when an African American woman receives well-deserved recognition for excellence in a particular field of endeavor, the arts, education, sciences, business, she's often cheered not only for her specific accomplishment, but for being the first African American, or even the first African American woman to have done so. Even if we did not have a single statistic on the plight of African American women as a whole, the fact that we are still celebrating first is evidence that true equality has not yet been achieved. This means that we stand on the edge of the 21st century and still we are not free. As long as has been the case, our primary adversary is racism, the myth that we are innately inferior to white people, a myth that spawned and continues to spawn a horde of attitudes and actions that seek to ensure that our status in America remains that of second-class citizens. There are, of course, those in our nation who disbelieve the presence of racism in our lives, who insist that the battle against racism has been won and that race is no longer an issue of the advancement of African Americans. There are African Americans as well as whites who hold this position. In some cases, people have confused the desegregation of public facilities and the progress of some individuals with the full incorporation of all African Americans into the life of our nation. Others tell this line of a conditioned, willful blindness. After all, seeing is very disquieting. For one, injustice has a way of beckoning us to take correction action, which may require sacrifices that people generally do not wish to make. Moreover, fessing up to racism in America rubs against the myth of America as a land of the free and the home of the brave. As they say, confession may be good for the soul, but it is hard on the reputation. It is not surprising that African Americans who argue that racism is no longer a central force in our lives are received with open arms and rewarded with good press and the status of expert. Their message is comforting to those in power who want to maintain the status quo, who would forge us new chains by blocking progressive social legislation and cutting funding for programs that would rectify these injustices. Cliched but true, racism is alive and doing too well in America. Moreover, I do not view the faces of racism as fundamentally different from times past. As has always been the case, it runs the gamut from blatant to more sophisticated expressions. Whenever I hear commentary on the subtlety of today's racism, I am quick to point out that there is nothing subtle about savagely beating African American men in Howard Beach, the brutal beating of Rodney King by policemen, or sending a package bomb to the NAACP office in Jacksonville, Florida. Such atrocities are also far from new. Remember Emmett Till? Remember the little girls in Birmingham? Likewise, the racial incidents on our college and university campuses that were publicized in the last few years are neither subtle or markedly different from the race baiting and humiliations African Americans have historically experienced at predominantly white institutions of higher learning. Finally, if there is one symbol of the most barbaric expressism of racism, it is Ku Klux Klan. The Klan marches again, and the Klan has company. The Posse Committee, Aryan Nations, White Aryan Resistance, and other hate groups that preach white supremacy and practice what they preach by terrorizing African Americans, the other people of color, and Jews. Sadly, as in the past, religion is used to sanctify and justify racism. The identity movement is a case in point. As the Joint Center of Political and Economic Studies reported in the April 1990 issue of the newsletter Focus. According to a study conducted by the National Council of Churches, identity is a racist faith with a complete theology. Blacks and other people of color are believed to be pre-Adamic, and therefore subhuman. Jews are regarded as children of the devil. The doctrine goes on. Racial integration is a sin. Armageddon would be the race war in the United States for which whites must prepare by stockpiling weapons, food, etc. The faithful will be redeemed when the U.S. becomes a white Christian republic. The writer describes the ideal identity theory as the spiritual glue that helps bind together large portions of the white supremacist movement, and quotes one sociologist as saying, "The danger to society from identity exists precisely because it recruits from the mainstream of society rather than its margins."